This is the Empire Podcast. Released January 9th, 2022. Episode 572. Technology Instruction with Charlie Larrabee. Welcome to the Amp Hour. I'm Chris Gamble of Contextual Electronics.
And I'm Charlie Larrabee. I'm the lab guru for DaVinci Lab for Creative Arts and Sciences.
Hey, Charlie. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Good. It's been a long time since we've seen each other, but we've known each other many years. I think we're probably pushing 20 plus years now, huh?
Yeah, I think that's about exactly right. Yeah, I was just thinking about before the show, I was thinking about how years back when I was getting interested in learning about KiCad and looking at videos online and information for how to do it, and then your face popped up and I was like, oh my God, what's Chris doing explaining GNU software? And it was kind of blew my mind a little bit, but like in a really good way. Yeah, I think that's
great.
when I started.
Glad to have done
Yeah, I
that.
think that's when I started texting you and bugging you about KiCad stuff.
Charlie was one of the first people I ever knew. So I knew Charlie in college, and I would walk to his room, and he would just be sitting there. So like obviously I was learning electronics in class or whatever, but Charlie was the quintessential shows up at college, already an electronics nerd, already knows all the fun stuff, and like he's like sitting there soldering in his room and building amps and building like guitar pedals and awesome stuff like that. And I just remember like the enthusiasm you had about electronics was so infectious, and I really appreciated that about you. I thought it was just yeah. I still think back to that.
That's cool. I'm so glad to hear that, Chris. That's really awesome. I've always thought, growing up, I've always felt like electricity is magic, and everything that has to do with electricity is
right.
magic.
And I think I've stolen that quote from you. I think I've mentioned that on the show before. And like we were talking about RF or something. You're like, it's like the closest thing we have to magic.
Yeah,
I've probably quoted you on the show more than I remember even. So
yeah. Well, I'm sure I'm not the only person who said that.
You're like, it's like we're hearing source material here now. So this is good.
But yeah, I've always been drawn to projects like that have to do with RF, and that's why I got really interested in vacuum tubes and thyrotrons and stuff like that. And it's just like, how does this work? I don't know. Does it matter? Let's play with it. And it's just so enjoyable to mess around with stuff and tinker and design things. Yeah.
What was your start? I mean, was it a strong figure in your life that taught you electronics? Was it just taking stuff apart, or what was the genesis?
It was one of the Radio Shack kits, the 130 in one project kits with the little spring terminals.
Yeah.
And I got one of those for Christmas when I was 9. And I don't know, something about it just clicked with me, and I started building projects on there, and started going to Radio Shack and getting my own parts and breadboarding, and I always had this fantasy that I was going to work at Radio Shack and people were going to bring me their broken electronics and I would repair them for them. And when I was 16, I went and signed up for a job there, or did the training for pre-job training. And of course it's like, here's how you sell
batteries.
Yes. Here's how you sell gateway computers. And here's how you get people signed up for cell phone contracts. And and if you don't like show a certain amount of like increase on your number of sales, then we're going to punish you by sending you to like a worse Radio Shack. And that's how it is to work for us. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds terrible.
Well, I mean, see, these days it would be, I believe I saw on the news that Radio Shack is getting into cryptocurrencies or something equivalently stupid.
Really?
And so, yeah.
I
It's gotten even worse somehow.
I'm
Somehow
I'm
they keep
surprised
getting
that
worse.
I thought they ceased to exist. But they're
I think it's probably a enterprising individual who's into cryptocurrencies and bought the IP behind Radio Shack. But I think if you go to
nice.
Radio Shack's website, it says something about crypto. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'll have to look into that.
So it's like, are you guys misspelling crystals like crystal radio? But you're saying crypto?
That must be it. That must be it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So so I guess a lot of that stuff early on I was pretty self-taught, and then when I had to actually start connecting the math to like this is how you calculate how much current goes through something, I was always kind of like, what?
Hmm.
Don't you just test it and try it and see if it gets hot?
Yeah.
So that was always kind of my mo for
Hmm.
that kind of thing.
Yep.
But yeah, electricity's magic. Always loved it. Still do it.
Still do. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you started with a Radio Shack kit. I think that's a common experience to a lot of people listening to this.
Oh yeah.
Now you're in an education. You're the lead guru at a school, and you do maker programs that we're going to get into here. But like,
Yeah.
what is what is going to be the gap now? Like, what is the so kids that are starting these days that don't have Radio Shack because they're not in a cryptocurrency, and I guess there's still the spring terminal kits that are out there. Like,
Right.
what are they doing? You're seeing this. You're helping these kids get started. What does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty amazing what's like you said, it's really different now. Like there's no longer really any stores that you can walk into and say like, oh, that's interesting. Let me find out more about it. On the other hand, there's so many learning related things, right? So I actually got some of
Hmm.
the spring terminal kits for my kids to mess around with
Oh yeah.
that, and they're not interested in it at all.
What is
But
this
they do
baby
like
stuff?
yeah, right. Well, what they do like is snap circuits, which
Oh, interesting.
I never would have thought they'd be interested. They love snap circuits. So that's kind of like these little Lego blocks that have well snaps and on the backs of them, and they little different little circuit components, and so that's one thing that's good. And then with my middle schoolers, I've been using. Last year we used microbit computers, and they really like that a lot. And this year my middle schoolers are using the Circuit Playground Express from Adafruit, because we couldn't get microbits. They were
Right.
they disappeared. They dried up. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
But
Yeah.
that's fine. Because they feel like from their perspective, it's like, oh, we're doing something new now. But I mean, it's really,
Hmm.
more microcontroller stuff.
Yeah, I think if you're willing to be flexible on like, curriculum style, or if, just even I think one of the problems is that, there isn't variety in a lot of curricula because like there's just, you have to keep it consistent over time, but then, kids want variety there anyway. So I would imagine that would actually be a benefit there as long as you're willing to be flexible as the instructor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that in my job, it really helps to kind of change it up a bit. So I kind of have like two sets of projects that I do per year. Like I have one year we'll talk about this one thing, and then the next year we'll kind of talk about something that's similar but framed a little bit differently, so the kids feel like it's new. What they don't know is that we're reviewing material and strengthening their knowledge on that. um,
Ah, that's good.
and I've that's been working really well, I think. And one of the things that I'm really lucky in my role is that I'm given a lot of freedom to adjust the curriculum, or put things in as it's um, as it's relevant to what we're doing, or change things up. One of the things that we're looking forward to is I have an application in right now for a space station contact, as the International Space Station. They set up a certain number of um, planned contacts with schools throughout the year. So I got past the first round of application. So fingers crossed,
That's awesome.
we'll get picked. Yeah, we'll get picked to talk with the astronauts this coming fall. So
That would be
my
so
kids are
cool.
really excited about that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Except for the ones who are graduating, they're like pretty
Yeah,
miffed.
right. They're like, "We're coming back.
Yeah,
You better have extra chairs in the classroom."
exactly, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, I told them that they'll be invited back if we get it.
Yeah,
So I'm
that's good.
personally I'm really excited about that. It's something that I've wanted to do for a lot of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, no, it's really great that it's part of like the charter. I mean, like I applied and got an invite to one of the launches last year, 2 years ago, I think. And
Mm,
uh I I had other plans that I couldn't that when the launch got
hmm
moved, I had other plans that I couldn't move and but just like seeing that happen, I mean, like that's
Sure.
so cool that that's like part of their, and like then reaching out to school kids and just, it's like it's a really great part of the space program and NASA in general. So I'm not sure what's going to happen after the
Oh
IS.
yeah.
Isn't the ISS going to get decommissioned relatively soon?
Yes. I think I'm not sure how soon. I want to say it's on the order of 3 or 4 years. I could be off on that, but yeah, that's I mean relatively pretty soon. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's going to get replaced with another space station. Maybe I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
remember reading that it was like individual countries, or sorry, private enterprise as well was going to have like basically like smaller substations as like launching platforms for other exploration, or basically they're going to cut down on the size and the management, the centralized management of it. But it was also going to there's going to be more stuff up there. I'll try and link in an article I saw about it, but yeah, but I just think about like, okay, but now there's just less coolness, like I don't know, like ISS is it's its own thing. It's like there's so many different modules up there, and it's pretty big,
Oh
and
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
I
And I
just want
mean,
more space
there's
stuff.
there's people in it living in there. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the thing that really gets me every time is this doesn't happen super often. Maybe a few handful of times a year, um, but you can see it in the evening. The ISS
Yep.
going overhead because the sun's lined up just in the right way, so we have darkness in the sky, but it's being lit up by the sun is hitting it up higher, right? And so
Yeah. Yep.
you see this satellite go overhead and it's lit up, and you're like, oh my god, that's not a plane,
Yeah.
but it's
It's just
moving and it's got people in
people.
it, and it's in
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think
Here they
I don't
are
know that.
sitting in a tin
Yeah,
can,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
high above the
That's
world.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and that just never gets old to me. Like
Yeah.
having that realization is just wow.
Yeah.
And that's cool stuff. And that's one of the things that like elementary kids too. There are certain things that they will never get tired of. Space, dinosaurs, rocks.
Yep, yep. I'm
Let's
just
see
thinking in my
what
head.
else. There,
Checklist. Check, check, check. Yeah, apparently
right.
I'm in the same category. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But in anything related to space, the kids just love it. It just really is
Yeah.
a feeds their imagination, and there's so much to think
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So, I mean, so you teach kids that are, from pretty young up to, you said, I think 13, 14, like, so like eighth grade or so. So,
And my youngest students are about 6 years old, so about six to
mm,
14. They're right in there.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge range, especially like, so now you're trying to teach pretty broad concepts like space and just technology in general. Like, what changes in terms of when you're, let's just go with the extreme. So you're talking to a 6-year old, you're talking to a 14-year old. How does that interaction as an instructor change?
yeah. You're absolutely right. There's a big difference in like what's age appropriate material for each level, and the difference between what a first grader is going to be ready for versus an eighth grader. I'd say generally for the my upper levels, like middle school, I would be talking about an orbital path, or let's say, and then I would ask them to do a little bit of math. Like
Oh,
let's find the circumference of the orbit or something like
oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
Not too crazy, but like
Right. No
just something to
derivatives, but
right, yeah, just something to
yeah,
bring it into like let's put numbers to what's happening, or let's think about
yeah, that's great.
you know, let's think about what this speed means. How can we relate to that in our life here on the planet? um, Whereas for the younger students, we would probably think more about like imagination type things, and relating to, you know, what would it feel like be in this to be in the space station, or you know,
Mm,
what kind
yeah.
of things do you think you would need if you were in space, like you know, as if you were preparing for a camping trip or something like that.
Yeah, right.
um
Do any of them say air? Do they think? I mean, like, is that
oh yeah,
part of
yeah,
the? Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Air.
Probably the last thing
a
I'd
lot,
list.
a lot of them want to get a like a lasso in case they get separated from
Oh,
the
it's pretty
station, so they
good.
can
Yeah.
lasso their way back. Or a lot of them say they want to bring ice cream with them because
No, no,
they
no. They NASA sends you ice cream. That's
yeah, right.
I've learned that at the Smithsonian. It's
That's
freeze
right.
dried and it's Neapolitan.
It's all they eat. Yeah, so it's that's something that I've learned as I've been teaching is yeah, how to present the material, because I'll see different levels throughout the day, but I'll present similar material but in a way that's appropriate to kind of where they're at in like thinking about subjects.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's taken some practice.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, that's I would I would imagine I would be trying to teach myself, and that would be very very high level. And like just thinking about the terminology definition type stuff. Like I'll say a word that's something very normal for me. I'll say resistor and be like, oh, everybody knows what a resistor is, and you know
Hmm.
well, it's an element that has resistance, and okay, resistance is that just like all the way, just plops all the way down the path to trying to then be like, well, an electron is. Uh,
Yeah,
so yeah,
it's no, it's actually really hard to teach kids about stuff that you're really knowledgeable about, or I should say something that you've been thinking about for a long time. And then
yeah,
you kind of forget what it was like to approach that topic for the first time.
hmm
um, so I found that in those kind of cases, it helps to zoom in like super small. Like, let's talk about this one little tiny thing that's interesting in and of
yeah.
itself, and then let's look at how that's happening.
And that makes a lot of sense to me. I feel like the thing I always when I think about getting down to that very base level is that like so now you're like super zoomed in and you're talking about like an electron jumping across a gap, which it's
Hmm.
probably very very way too high level, but like something that might be interesting like that, and it is kind of it's a small unit of learning, and you could have outcomes there, but then it's like so hard to tie that all the way back to like, oh, but then the LED lights up and your Christmas tree looks cool and it's less power than if it was a heated wire. It's just like I feel like the tying it back is the most important part. And well,
Sure.
you and
Yeah.
I were there
Yeah.
struggling through education as well, and it was they did not when it wasn't tied back even at the collegiate level, it was very very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, yeah, I always found that really frustrating. To me as a learner personally, I want to know why. I want to know why we're learning something before the, you know, like I want to have a sort of a top down, like what's the point of like this section and what are we going to do with it before start learning the
Yeah.
details, which
hmm
is not a great way to be a student, I think. But
Yeah.
what I like to do now is to kind of like take some kind of tactile thing, like for instance, talking about electrons jumping across a gap. So I have this Wimshurst generator in my classroom, and so we'll set it up and start making sparks, and of course that's really exciting. And then
Yeah.
we start thinking about, yeah, like why what's creating the sparks, why do they come faster or slower, what makes the sparks bigger, what happens when we move the electrodes away from each other. um, and
Oh,
then
okay.
and then we can do some stuff to figure out, like what's the voltage jumping across the gap on the generator, right? Because we can measure it with a ruler,
Mm.
and we
Yep.
can
Yep.
say there's about this many centimeters between the electrodes. And so if we know the breakdown voltage for air, we can say that it's, a quarter of a million volts, or it's not that much probably, but
Yeah.
we can figure out some number. I think it usually comes out to like 70 or 80,000 volts, and
Mm.
then it depends on the how much humidity's in the air. But anyways,
Oh, right,
so I
right.
guess
Well,
that would be
and
it.
you're in Houston, and so yeah, so 100% is normally
Yeah, yeah, somewhere between 90 and 100 would be normal. Yes, yeah,
yeah,
it's funny. Like on on your forum that you run, and there's I see a lot of discussions about static sensitive devices and managing
yeah,
static
yeah.
shock and stuff like
ESD
that. And like,
protection, and
yeah,
yeah,
ESD
yeah,
protection. I'm like, that is so interesting. And I as long as I live here, I'm never going to like care
yeah,
about any of that stuff at all,
yeah,
pretty much,
yeah,
except maybe for a few
yeah.
days during the winter.
My one
Yeah.
friend moved to the desert from a much more humid location, and he's like, I
Hmm.
just outfitted my entire lab with just like everything's ESD, because it was like 5% humidity. It's like, holy moly, and
Wow. Yeah.
now I'm
Yeah.
living much more
That's
south in the
scary.
winter, and I'm like, well, I'm probably okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet so. How's the winter been at in you're in Durham? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's been pretty mild so far. Cold days here and there, but usually in the afternoon it warms up into the 50s or 10 to 15 C for
Awesome.
the
That
rest of the
sounds
world.
like
Yeah,
way nicer than the Windy City winters,
that's right.
I would have thought.
Yeah, I'm not. I miss the people in the windy city, but that's about it. The windy part
Sure.
can pound salt. Uh,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
so when you are kind of teaching this stuff, right? And you mentioned this the generator. That reminds me a lot of like my physics teacher kind of
Hmm.
that was when I kind of got enamored with electricity in general as well. Like that same kind of like, all right, let's do some experiments around electricity. Let's see some sparks fly. Let's see what happens. Um, but what about stuff that's maybe a little bit harder to have in the physical realm? I mean, so like you're showing something that's very visceral. It's got sparks, it's got sound, it's got all the stuff that a generator, a high voltage demonstration does that we enjoy. But what about like when
Hmm.
you're trying to say like, okay, well now let's program a computer that just maybe does this thing if you do everything right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. And there's two things that I rely on heavily for like beginning programming. And one of them, I mean, the main thing is actually to do make things visual as possible. So have the
Mm,
output of the code run a turtle, for instance. Like, so if we're doing Python, we'll be making turtle shapes or whatever. And then
yep.
there are also some resources that I've been using a lot, like code.org. I use a lot with my younger students, and that's a great way to make the outcomes be very very visual and
Mm.
easy to follow.
I don't
So,
know if I know code.org.
oh, okay,
Oh,
it's
interesting.
I think it's a Microsoft undertaking, but they it's really well done, and they separate all of their levels by age, and whoever's involved with it, they've, I think, done a really nice job of making their coding projects be age appropriate. And
Yeah.
so yeah, right. So one challenge with teaching someone who's like in the beginning of elementary school, and is that they may not read yet,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's
That's
totally
that's
normal.
something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you tell a first grader to click on the start button, they may not know which one that is, even if it has
Yeah.
start written on it
Right.
real big. and that's
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
And so what they do in code.org is they take, for that level of learners, they make everything symbols, right? So if you're going to move your character on your little output screen, if you're going to move them to the right, it just has an arrow to the right, and that's your line of
Mm,
code, is an arrow to the right, and then you go down to the next line of code and move it down or whatever.
interesting.
So that's really, they've done a really nice job of thinking about that stuff.
Yeah, because another thing I've wondered about with just developmentally as well, like I remember hearing about like, well, why don't they teach algebra to like third or fourth graders? And I'm like, well, actually, kids' brains can't abstract concepts at a certain age. Before a certain age, you just like can't hold the idea that x represents a variable, right? Or that x
Yep.
represents a number, and it's just really hard to do that. And that was
Yep.
my primary exposure, like you know. If I equals one, like that sort of thing is like the first thing I learned in programming. But obviously, there must be other things in here, so it's more like decision trees or the visual piece, like you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah. And yes, absolutely. Algebra is something that kids usually learn in middle school because that's the time when their brains are able to do that. And prior to that, they're not. Usually for
Yeah.
for most people. But
Yes. Right. Yeah.
yeah, you know what? Typically, there's not a lot done with variables until, mm, I want to say until like later in elementary school, like fifth, sixth grade. On the
Mm-hmm.
on the
Yeah.
code.org stuff. Most of their focus is on, let's do things in sequence and think about how would you make an algorithm to maybe go through a maze or something like that.
Uh,
And
yeah.
they- and they're and they're, so they're focusing on sequence and on loops and on troubleshooting as well.
Oh, that's
So
good.
so most of the yeah, so a lot of the things, a lot of the puzzles will have like a step button, for troubleshooting. And every time you click on a step button, it goes down one line at a time, so they can do their
Mm.
debugging. And
Huh.
yeah, it's really nicely thought out. And I have to remind them over and over again. Like they'll come and, I mean, I'll have students who are like, I'm stuck on this. This one's impossible. This puzzle is impossible. And we'll just sit down together and like we'll read the instructions together. And sometimes
Mm.
that answers their question because they got in a hurry and didn't want to read the instructions. Or
Charlie, do
um,
you do that service for men in their late 30s who had the same problem with programming on an everyday basis sometimes?
yeah, 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 I could do
Because
with
like
having
seriously,
someone else.
that the number of times that is the problem where I'm like, oh yeah, look at that. Oh, that library just doesn't take that variable, and the instructions right at the top. Okay, yeah, cool.
You know what's really funny about teaching kids is, I find myself saying like, oh yeah, kids do this, but that's not really accurate as much as it would be to say people do this, and
Humans do this. Yeah,
humans
yeah,
do this. Yeah, so like
yeah.
a lot of the things that I see kids doing, adults do all those same things.
You have an
Yes.
example for us?
Well, like you said,
I
not
mean,
reading
obviously
it.
the reading. Yeah, not reading instructions. Right? Yep, yep.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Probably not
Not
not slowing down and like doing stepwise debugging as well, and just trying the same thing over and over again. I could think
Yeah,
of my own
yeah,
experience there.
jumping into projects without planning them,
Yeah.
um,
Oh, oh, boy, I feel triggered
is
right now, Charlie.
yeah, yeah. No, I
People are
mean
listening. They're
that's
like, "Oh
whatever.
God." Oh
But
man.
everybody does that because you
Yeah.
look at that and you think, oh, that's not going to be that hard. I'm going to be done with it in 15 minutes, so I shouldn't
Yep. Yep.
take the time to sit down and
Yeah.
draw it out first.
Yeah. Not
And
writing
I
down
get
my
that.
results and not
Yep,
journaling as things go. Not creating hypotheses. Oh
yep,
man.
yeah,
Time for me to go back to school.
yeah. So I like to think that I'm also learning good habits for myself by helping others to remember to have good habits. I don't know. Yeah, like I'm always learning from the kids
Oh,
for
I
sure.
believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about so you're doing stuff that's, you mentioned the microbit and the circuit playground and stuff like that. I'm really
Hmm.
curious about kids these days. Boy, do I sound like an old person. Younger people who are coming up right now. Um,
Uh-huh.
they have screens from a very young age. My daughter is less than a year, and she's
Hmm.
already like intensely attracted to screens and just LEDs and blinks and stuff like that. Anyways, but like so
Sure.
now do you make that connection to like, oh well, this is all your a phone or a tablet or your computer that you're using as well, this is all the guts inside of there, like how much do you tie that together?
I do that. You're talking about hardware, learning about hardware.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, so let's just we could focus on the circuit playground. I mean, that's got an accelerometer on it, for example, and you might have some examples with it or that are part of the learning program.
Yeah.
Do you then say, well, this is why your parents can use this for Google Maps, or like I don't know how much there is that logical the link between the two.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I try to go into some of that without being too exhaustive. Because like, yeah, I mean, you could spend a long time explaining every little detail about how an
Yeah,
accelerometer works. But
right.
typically, what I'll do kind of like a divide and conquer kind of strategy on, like if we have a board that has a bunch of different sensors, I'll have the kids each like pick a sensor and they'll research it, figure out what it
Oh,
does. Like maybe they'll watch a
yeah.
video on Spark Fun or something, and
Hmm.
they'll figure out what it does, write up a little report, and then either present that report or make a video of that they're delivering to their classmates, saying this is this is what this is the accelerometer on the microbit, this is what it does, this is how it works, this is why you might want to use it.
Yeah.
um, and
I mean, I think about the boards, even at a collegiate level. So you and I took very similar labs, and like just thinking about like some of the boards that were there and some of the
mhm,
interfaces. So like just thinking about like 7 segment displays, I knew what they were, sort of like having seen them on other devices, but it's such a big part of like intro to digital logic type labs. And it still was like this standalone thing that was not like, oh well, this is how people used to just display info, and it's like and so that same kind of like tying it back to the real world
yeah,
thing, I still didn't really care, and I'm not sure it really mattered all that much. But like the stuff's a lot cooler now too. Like
uh-huh.
I now that I've seen it all and you've seen it all, and we know like how this stuff's actually used. I would think I would have trouble like containing myself and be like, oh, but look at all these things it can do, and like it's in everything, like an accelerometer's everywhere. But like that, I don't know. It just feels like that's tough to navigate.
Yeah, it is because there can be so much complexity. I mean, if you're talking about a 7 segment display, go do you go into like, is it
Yeah.
common
Right.
anode or common
Right.
cathode, or like, or do you focus on, this is our tool that we're going to use to get the
Yeah.
information back
Right.
out of our
Right.
system. And I think if you take more of an approach about like, this is like, this is why it
Oh,
matters
that's
to
good.
us right now, then I think
Yeah.
that really helps a lot. um, and oh yeah, also I wanted, since you brought up kids these days, I think it's really funny. There's a lot of attitudes about, parents will tell me like, oh well, my kid knows how to work the iPad and whatever. And but when they come into my classroom in first grade, almost none of them
Oh,
know how
yeah.
to use a
Right.
mouse. And they hate
Yeah.
they hate the mouse. They do not like the mouse. It's new, it's hard, it's not
Yeah.
cool. um, there's like a
Mhm.
wire coming
Mhm.
out of
Yeah.
it usually. And
Right. They're
yeah,
like
so
tapping on the screen. They're like they're like
no, yeah, 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 totally. I mean, because that's how all
yeah.
the consumer devices are set up. So at some point, we usually have to have a conversation around like, there are ways that you can use a computer to
Mm,
be a consumer, and there are ways that you can use a
yeah.
computer to be a creator. And just being able to do the things that are allowed for you to do from inside the user interface, that's not usually a way to
Yeah.
make something new. or to be creative, and they're
That's
like,
oh,
oh yeah, okay, and
that's really good.
that makes
Yeah,
sense. It,
the making something new and like the computer as a tool. That's a really I like that.
yeah. Well, thank you.
More on that topic actually is like one thing I've been thinking about like like every new I'm a new parent, relatively new parent, and
Mhm.
people for some reason ask me, well, what do you think she'll be when she grows up? And I'm like, I don't know, like whatever she wants to be. But the one
Yeah.
thing that I think about is like I want her to be a producer or creator of some sort, right? It doesn't have to be like she has to make electronics or has to make anything. But like I think one thing that I generally fret about in the world these days is consumption as a general topic of like, oh well, young YouTubers who are praised for their like video game playing, and like then just a bunch of people are watching it, and there's just a
Oh
lot of people
yeah.
out there just watching other people play video games. Then that's just like a really weird form of consumption to me, and it's
Yeah.
very encompassing and like and kind of almost highlighted because there's for the game companies there's money in it. Like, and I get all the economics of it, but I when I think about like the things I want for kids generally is just to be like creative and like put stuff out in the world that's useful and fun, and I don't know, like versus just consuming. So
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
that same kind of topic.
It's weird how much, yeah, the culture today around like, what do you want to be when you grow up, and like a lot of, I could ask a lot of kids that, and they would say, I want to be a YouTuber.
YouTuber, yeah,
um
yeah.
and
When Dave co-host Dave is Dave Jones mentions when he does like he goes into his son's classes and gives talks and stuff, and the kids are really
Mhm.
interested in the fact that he's a YouTuber. The fact that he does electronics in there is like who cares, right? But it's like, oh,
Yeah.
YouTube is his job, like that. Oh, that's what they want to do. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's yeah, okay, I guess that's the thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of them, they don't really, they don't necessarily realize like the amount of work that goes into, like Dave's channel, for instance. He's I would imagine that Dave is constantly working and coming up with new ideas, and tearing stuff apart, coming up with explanations, building stuff up, and so much work. But from the consumer side of things, it's just like, oh well, he's just talking, you know,
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah,
I think across all YouTubers, like a lot of that stuff is hidden. Like the amount of time it takes to make videos and stuff like that, and it's just yeah. Oh, it's this thing that shows up on my tiny screen. So yeah,
yeah.
I think that's just a general challenge for yeah. So to make it just personal, I don't want to make pass judgment on anyone else. When I
Hmm.
think about like what I want for my child is just like yeah, I want to create things in the world. That's the main thing, not just consumption.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's I think that's what everybody's looking for, really, as we find our way through life, is what do you find satisfying, that
Yeah,
that makes
yeah,
you feel good about what you're doing,
yeah,
here. um oh
yeah.
yeah, one other thing I should uh uh, mention that really gets kids ears perked up is, I will announce to them when I'm going to be hacking, and they really like that a lot.
Interesting.
Yes. So we,
What is their reference point for hacking?
all over the place, all over the, usually
Uh-huh.
like a guy with a hooded sweatshirt uh
Aha. Yes. Yes.
on the 6 o'clock news, and but the typical one is like, we'll be on like a Zoom class or something like that, and I'll be sharing my screen, and I'll go to some website, and there'll be a popover, and then I'll show them how to delete the popover from inside the browser, and
mm.
and then we'll have a little talk about how, like, this is code that came onto your browser, and
Ah.
it's, you have control of it because it's sitting on your computer, and you can change it, and you can
Yeah.
do what you want with it, if you know it's there. And then
Charlie, are you like the Morpheus to their Neo? Is that what I'm hearing here? You're like it's just it's the mate to see the Matrix.
I I
You can choose Neo.
I would hope so. I would hope so. That's
I
that's what
hope
I
so too.
that's what I aspire to be, anyways.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Have you been doing this long enough to have so you've been doing this 6-ish years, is that right? The
yes,
lab guru
correct.
longer than that? Yeah.
about 6 years. I've been doing it for long enough that my youngest students were not yet born when I started teaching.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I was actually wondering on the other side, have you had any students come back and be like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm in it. I'm in it to win it. I'm a, computer engineer, software engineer, whatever. I'm going to school for this sort of stuff. I've chosen the nerd life."
Right. Yeah. No, not yet. Not yet.
Okay. All right. Yeah, yeah.
My students, my oldest students would be like just getting into college, or like they'd be maybe
Oh
a year
yeah,
or two into
right.
college now.
Got it. Yeah.
So
So a couple more years until they're like, "Yeah, well, I'm at Google now or whatever." Uh,
yeah, I would love to. I would love to hear back from any of my students
yeah.
about their successes in life or challenges or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I went back and I talked to my physics teacher. I told him to his face. I was like, "Look, you're the you're the reason I'm in electronics now." And
That's awesome.
I think he appreciated it. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
he
I'm sure
probably
he's awkward about it.
spent a moment being like, Chris Gamble?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yes, right. Yeah, I don't know. If it
And they're
was,
like, "I'll show you. I'm gonna make a podcast with a guy from Australia,
yeah,
and
right,
we'll talk about electronics all the time."
right. Well, either that or maybe he leafed back through his grade book and was like, oh, yeah,
Oh,
I
oh
remember
yeah,
you.
yeah. Oh boy, slightly better than he was. Slightly.
But yeah, no, I mean, I'm just kidding. I I loved doing physics in high school. Like that was such a
Yeah. Yeah, it's a formative, and it's like experiments are so like, I don't know, results based. It's like, yeah, look,
hmm
the ball rolls down the inclined plane. We did it, guys.
yeah, and you start doing s- math for stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I guess that would also be true for chemistry, I guess, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's like a lot of stuff that I was supposed to have already known coming into physics, and then I started doing physics, and then like all of this stuff from years prior just started clicking, and I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that I don't know. I feel like that is a very positive in an educational sense. Those are formative moments, right? Where it's like, oh, I get this now. Like, I mean, hell, I've talked on the show a couple times when I finally figured out what the hell all the math was
Mm-hmm.
around a Fourier transform. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, I get it. There's a single line for a sine wave, and that's the frequency. Like,
Yeah.
finally,
Yeah.
you know?
It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great nowadays. It's great. Like, we have these little doohickeys. I have one of those. I forget what it's called. Mini spectrum analyzers or something like that. And it's
Oh,
like,
like the nano VNAs
yes,
or
yeah,
something.
yeah. And
Yeah.
just like that, there's another version that's a spectrum analyzer, and it's like the size of a
Got it.
cell phone or something like that, and it just shows you
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's really cool. Um,
Yeah.
if I had a college class, I'd probably just like hand out a bunch of those at the beginning of the class.
Exactly.
Be like,
Yeah.
here, play with this. Let's talk
Yeah.
about it in a couple of
Go
days.
go find the spectrum. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on the realm of spectrum as well. So you are also a ham, a longtime ham.
hmm
What is your poison in the ham space? Are you a low power? Are you a long distance? What are
Well,
you trying to do there?
I'm still I just kind of explore. I
Yeah.
like doing. Um, I guess I'm interested in satellites. I'm interested in DXing, so getting like atmospheric skip to go to other countries. I'm
Yeah.
interested
That's
in.
that's definitely in the magic realm. It's
Oh
like, oh,
yeah,
this is going how far?
yeah, yeah, exactly. I guess those are some of the main things, and
Hmm.
I'm gradually working on my CW or Morse code,
Yep.
which is yeah takes a long time to learn for me, anyways.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
feel like
it's
that's. the hams of old and the Elmers that are out there, they're probably listening to us talk about this stuff, and they're like, like whatever we're saying about kids these days, they were saying that about us with kids these days. Oh, they
Yeah.
don't know how to use a CW, and it's like
Yep.
they
Yep.
don't know Morse for the from the back of their hand. And oh well, yeah, sorry guys, like
Yep. And
we have
yeah,
screens.
I definitely hear them talk about it on the reg
Oh
about
yeah,
no coders, and it's like, yeah, well, that's fine.
yeah.
That's fine.
Technology just changes. Yeah, there's just different foci, I
Yeah.
suppose.
But one of the things that I really love about ham radio is that it's a community where there are people who are exploring electronics from different kinds of
Mm-hmm,
backgrounds, and
mm-hmm,
that's something that I've always thought was a challenge for me. Was like, if I was to learn something or finish a cool project, there wasn't always a good way for me to share that with anybody.
mm.
You know, but in that type of community, then people actually get what you're talking about, and it's not like their eyes glaze over, like, oh, wow, you got an op amp wired up to do something, and that's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that does help. I mean, so you also do audio type stuff as well, and I feel like that's another audience where they would be more into it, but it's probably more like, well, yeah, but what does it do for my guitar sound? Right? I
Yeah.
guess that's more targeted than
Yeah,
or
exactly. And that's a lot of fun too, working with the vacuum tubes, and um, that's what a cool technology. And my latest project that I've been working on is I'm trying to mimic the sort of the non-linearities of vacuum tubes using a whole bunch of JFETs. Um,
oh, nice.
yeah, and so I'm building this. It's like a mini guitar amp that where the PCB is the faceplate, and all the bits sit on the backside, and oh, I think I mentioned this to you before. The Philadelphia soldering. So like
Mm,
the through hole pieces that are soldered, like bent over and soldered onto the board as if they're surface mount. And I
yep,
read
yep.
somebody call that Philadelphia style soldering, and
Yeah, I've
I've
heard
never.
Manhattan as well. I've
Ah,
seen
okay, okay, okay.
I think I've seen Philadelphia and Manhattan. I think, yeah. Do you use like the metal pads? No, wait, maybe I'm thinking of a different thing. The Manhattan one I think is like the little metal pads that you like glue down, and those are like centralized like SMD points effectively, and then you
Ah,
solder leaded components to that.
ah.
Maybe this is different than that.
Yeah. I don't know. I've only it's only like ever a thing I've heard it mentioned in ham context.
Hmm.
So there's no telling where it came from, if it's an actual thing or if somebody just made it up. But
Well, Manhattan, Philadelphia, pretty close,
yeah,
pretty
yeah,
close together.
yeah,
That's great. And so on the JFET side, I mean, like, so so is that, at the beginning of the show too, you talked about like, I'd rather just kind of figure it out and kind of do it by feel. Is that a thing where you're like, you would go and simulate that first? Or is it more of a follow schematic, see how it sounds, see if it's actually nonlinear in a similar way?
yeah. Basically, yeah. I never really do any kind of simulations, although I probably should. But I just my typical design path is I'll just get the data sheets for the parts and see if I'm making enough, look at impedances, see if I'm making enough power for like an output transformer. Um,
Hmm.
Try to make my best guess about where things are going to be biased. And then after that, just do empirical measurements. So like on this board, I put in bias pots for every single transistor. So if I'm way off, I can tweak it quite a bit.
Yep. Yep.
Um,
Yeah. That makes sense. And that's like early prototyping type of thing too. And you're trying to kind of, sounds like you're kind of trying to feel out what's even possible and if it's in the realm of possibility first.
Exactly,
And
exactly. And if it works, does it sound good? Um,
yeah,
and is it
which is,
is it
yeah.
fun to play? So, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, so yeah, I don't know. So that's something that I've been uh, playing with. I'm hoping to maybe release that as a kit. So like a kit that's like 90% finished. Like all the parts are on
Okay.
there. You just have to like hook up a power wire and hook up the speaker, and maybe you make an enclosure for the speaker or something like that. And I think a lot of people
Yeah.
would find that to be like a fun project.
Yeah, and that's a great like getting started for people in the audio realm as well. Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's interesting. Like I think about ham, I think about audio. These are like really common paths in, and I feel like a lot of people kind of get stopped at that point. They're like, well, okay, well, I've stuck together a kit, but then the education piece, they're like, I can never do the math or whatever, and it's just like, yeah, but just keep going a little bit further, or like just look in this one corner over here, and you're gonna find something else that keeps you going. It's just like it's tough to think about the paths that would keep people interested enough, especially if they're coming in as adult learners. I feel like
Sure. Yeah.
that
I think.
resilience is tough.
Yeah, and I think that would be a really big challenge too. To I think it would be easy to get discouraged when you see the breadth and depth of all of the things related to electronics, and it's so
Yeah.
easy to get sort of like out of your element, just because you haven't heard of
Mm.
something. There's a new name for something, but maybe you did know about
Yeah.
it, but you just didn't know it was called that.
Yeah. Like what to Google for problem.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. And I definitely, I find it kind of discouraging. I see a lot of stuff on forums online, where people will be giving advice, and it's
Mm.
like the person giving the advice clearly doesn't understand what they're talking about, but they know enough
Mm.
words to be dangerous, and they're just like, "This is
Hmm.
you don't know what you're talking about, and you got to do a such and such." And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
And but then nobody knows more than that person to be able to like shut them down and be like, okay,
Right.
just stop.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I think it's a field that can be really intimidating from if you come in from starting
Yes.
afresh.
Definitely agree. Definitely agree. I mean, so to stay on the resilience piece as well, because we're talking about adult learners and our own experiences with this.
Sure.
What about kids and like their resilience level as well? I mean, you had mentioned like a student walking up to you and having trouble troubleshooting and that
Hmm.
sort of thing. But what do you do to encourage resilience? Because that's another thing I think about, like teaching my daughter, helping my daughter. Like resilience is something that I've seen. The most successful people that I see are the ones who are able to understand when they should stick with it, and like that is just such a tough thing to do and encourage, and I struggle with myself. What do you
Sure.
see with students?
Yeah. So I think resilience is in a large part is about confidence, and
Yeah.
the the there are, well, I guess they're related, but the one of the biggest ways I think to build confidence, if you have a student, or you're feeling yourself like, I'm not good enough to do this, I can't do this, or um, what's the point in trying? I think the best thing to do
Uh,
in one of those cases is to break the problem down into like a little bit smaller parts, and kind of
mhm.
set that person up for success. Like, yeah, I know you're feeling discouraged that to go from A to B, but like maybe there's a smaller step in the middle that you can do to show that,
Mm.
yeah, you are capable of, you know mastery in this subject. Like for instance, like I'll give my middle schoolers like a problem to work on, where they got to make a program that makes the Fibonacci sequence or something,
Mm.
and we'll do
That's
that for
great.
like a warm up for class. And then some of them will be like, cool, this is hard and I can do it. And then some of them will be like, what's the point in even starting? I suck at this. And then we'll try to kind of break it down into some smaller parts, and then be like, okay, well, let's start by doing this smaller thing. Here's your step one. And then I get them
Yeah.
over step one. And then, where's your step two? And then getting over step two. And yeah. So,
Oh,
just,
that's
so
great.
yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I mean, I'm all about building confidence. And I think
Hmm.
that's what really allows people to shine, and also people that are not thinking about like I could be an engineer, or I I think of myself as
Hmm.
a coder
Yeah.
or stuff like that. Those kids normally don't have any
Right.
trouble at all.
Yeah, because they've like internalized it. I think that would only be problematic if they run into a true roadblock and then they're like, "But I'm supposed to be a coder or I'm supposed to be an engineer." And it's like, well, actually, you just ran into a thing where like you're running into the laws of physics and there's nothing you can do there. It's just like, yeah, it's a little. It's only problematic when they run into true problems and it's like,
Yeah,
it's yeah,
yeah,
that internalization.
but by and large, for kids or for anybody, there's so much value in having a mindset of it's like me to do this. It's like me to solve this kind of problem.
Mm.
And you know yeah, so to kind of build that mindset up is really awesome.
Yes, once again, I'd like to just say if I could hire you to come sit in my lab and just to be like, Chris, it's like you to do this, or like this
Definitely.
people stuff you're talking about. It's very important. I think one of the things I think about is like, okay, so I'm a hardware engineer. I've been doing this a long time, but there is so much I don't know, and so like I run into a new
Hmm.
thing, and then sometimes I have to remind myself like, no, no, this is brand new. Like you need to be easy. Need to go easier on yourself, and like you're talking about, break it down into smaller steps, and get some small wins. And like, man, all these things are just, they're people things. They're not kid things.
Totally, totally. I completely agree. Well, maybe Chris, I can build you a little box with a button on the top, and you press it, and it says, "You're doing
Yeah.
great, Chris. Stay focused. You're gonna get
Well,
this.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Make a drawing."
Make a drawing. Yeah, that's good. Actually, yeah, write something down. Have you written something down today? Have you tracked your own progress? Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
And then what you need is like just like a randomizer, so it just says it in different ways. So I'm not like, oh well, that's just the Charlie box talk, and I can ignore that. Uh,
Oh yes, I actually I had one of my students from a couple of years ago had this awesome. We do these innovation projects like as a capstone um, project at the end of the year.
mhm.
One of my students made an electronic um, psych- psychologist or therapist or
like
whatever. And
like a Lucy 5 cents the psychiatrist is in sort of thing, but in a
yeah,
box.
yes, he made that,
Awesome.
and it has like 4 or 5 different buttons on the front, and it's like I'm feeling sad, and you press the sad button, and then it's like his voice reads some inspiring sentence of guidance, and then the next button is I'm feeling angry or depressed or whatever, and then
Yeah,
this student recorded themselves speaking these things, and it was so cool.
that's
What
awesome.
Yeah, I loved it so much. um,
Yeah,
and he just
that's really. I mean, that's marketable. That is a true product right there.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
basically Dr. Phil's entire career in electronic product.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
some more drama built in.
yeah. It's
Uh,
probably out there, but usually the little boxes that you push a button and it says something rude.
yeah, right.
That's the
The
only kind.
Spencer's gifts.
That's the
Yeah,
only kind I've seen. Yeah,
that's great. Okay, so I've mentioned a couple times that I'm invested in my daughter's education and just general learning and
yeah,
becoming a good human. Uh, Two things about that. One, I'm curious about your interaction with parents and how to not be the kind that teachers don't like. And
yeah,
two, I'm curious about like kind of best case paths you see for, a lot of people listening probably also have kids, and like, should we be buying them kits that are robots, or should we be putting them in summer camp that is for nerds, or sending them to space? You know what I mean? Like, just your experience, or obviously it's, whatever it is, but I'd love to hear it.
yeah. Sure. Yeah. So to your first question, my interactions with parents are like generally great. I'm really lucky because I have a like a specific class that kids are generally really excited to go to, and
Yeah.
I
Oh,
I,
I can almost guarantee that you are the class they talk about when the kids come home and like, how was school today? And it's like
I hope so. That would be
Professor
my hope.
Larrabee is the jam. You know, he's like,
That would be my hope.
yeah, yeah,
And the other thing is I only see them for pretty small part of the day. So
yeah,
the
yep, yep.
likelihood that we're gonna have like profound issues is
Right,
not
right.
that high. Um, so to your so generally like, oh man, my parents are awesome and like super
That's
supportive,
great.
and
That's
yeah,
great.
they're great.
I was kind of secretly hoping that you'd be like, well, this one guy, and don't do what this one guy does. He is just a total over the top so and so. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah.
okay.
So
That's all right.
so coming from a teacher's perspective, I mean, like, like I think what teachers are generally hoping for from parents is like to to and listen and have trust in them, but also like tell them your opinions and just to have an open communication, right? Because
Yeah,
teachers
yeah.
spend
Just
so
be
much
involved.
time with kids. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, being involved, being in going to PTO stuff, like I have
yeah.
great relationships with all of my PTO parents, and like
Hmm.
they're awesome, they're amazing. And that's really helpful for the kids, for to
Yeah,
have that kind of communication bond that provides that continuity throughout their entire day, right? So I'm with mom and dad, or
yeah,
I'm with my teacher, and like they talk with each other, and so everything is connected. So that's a good thing. Yeah, in terms of like how you can be a better um, person, like a better parent. That is a really hard question.
that's
And
pretty broad. I was actually more thinking like in the technology. So like, how do I encourage a child to do fun, creative things? I guess that's the real thing.
yeah,
Like thinking about the.
the,
So for
so
example, we bought my nephews and my niece robot kits. That was a real example. So we bought them like robot kits for Christmas this year. A lot of fun. I don't know if it's going to be
yeah,
a thing, but
yeah.
hopefully, maybe that'll
Now,
inspire them to love robots. That sort of thing.
no, definitely. And if it's not, and if they don't immediately launch into it, it can go on the shelf for a little bit until they think about it some more and they're ready to mess with it again later. And
Yeah.
that's the thing that's really challenging about being a teacher, about being a parent, is knowing what things are age appropriate. Like what are
Yeah.
what do kids what do kids want, and what are they capable of at their particular age.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
And
developmentally and just like
exactly,
attention wise and yeah, totally.
exactly. And some of the resources that I've used a lot for figuring that kind of stuff out is looking at a lot. There's a lot of free educational stuff for kids out there now. So like code.org is a great resource. Um, uh, commonsense.org is an awesome resource. I would recommend anyone who's a parent to go to commonsense.org. And that's about online safety and that type of thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And
totally.
they're yeah, and they're very keyed into, like, it's made by teachers. It's and they're very keyed into like um, these are the kinds of problems that a first or second grader is going to have with like going on the internet, or
Yep. Yep.
or interacting with technology in some ways. And it gives parents ideas of like this TV show or this movie is appropriate for this age or not, or whatever. So that I use that resource a lot. Let's see, what did I say? Code.org, commonsense.org, um, and also recently I've been looking at the positive discipline series of books. I just read the one for toddlers because that's kind of where, or sorry, the one for preschoolers because that's kind of where my daughter is right now. And though that series of books is really good because it talks about how to look at kids' motivations, and what's
Yeah.
appropriate for their age level, and like how to encourage them to to make their own choices and do their own stuff. And
Yeah.
it's a vast topic.
Yeah. I've had this discussion with my wife many times around like, well, I want like my kids to be a nerd, and she's like, you don't get to choose that, Chris. I'm like, I know, but I still want
Yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah.
All
No,
right, fine. She
no.
can, I guess, live her life in the best way she can. Fine, whatever.
Yeah, but I mean the best thing, that I think that any parent can do is listen to their kid and enable them to make choices, when it's appropriate, and you know just set them up to succeed and build confidence, and you know
Yeah,
then they'll do
yeah,
great and listen.
that's great. Great. That's great advice. Yeah, I mean, other teaching resources you've done as you've built other stuff up. I mean, you've mentioned SparkFun, the Adafruit boards, and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
Microbit.
Hmm.
Any other platforms you've seen? As you've developed curriculum
Oh
in
wow,
as an educator.
there's so many great ones out right now. Oh, and I should mention that we're using within the Circuit Playground Express world, we're using Circuit Python,
Oh yeah,
because I
yeah.
wanted the
How's that been?
been working really well. We're using like a beta IDE that runs on the web browser, and it works pretty well. I wish that we could
Yeah,
be using like a real one that's running on the computers, but the kids are all on Chromebooks, and
yeah,
that's a
yes,
that's a
yes.
walled garden, so everything's got to be kind of on the web browser. Um,
Yeah. So then it uses like web USB to talk to the
correct.
actual hardware and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, correct. Which is which
Mm.
is pretty
It's
amazing.
getting better. It's definitely getting better. I've been looking at it a little bit for work, and
Yeah,
but it's amazing that it can even do that. Like web USB, web Bluetooth, like all these things that are like, sweet, my browser's talking to a Bluetooth device. Like that's just kind of blows my mind that it's possible.
yeah, yeah. It's a little bit scary, but it's also really cool. That your web browser has that much control on your computer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
But I
yeah,
mean, like you said with Chromebooks, I mean that's almost like the whole OS is inside of Chrome at that point. So, but
true.
that's how they keep the cost down for these educational laptops, anyways, right? That's like a pretty common thing.
Yeah, yeah. They work pretty well. Everything works pretty well, and kids get to learn about the cloud and how everything auto saves for you all the time, and files never exist anywhere. They just kind of disappear into the mist until you call them back somehow.
Right,
It's
magical incantations.
yep,
You
yeah.
like do a mashup with like Harry Potter or something.
That's a good idea.
Spelliarmus, delete.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I had mentioned you're asking about hardware and stuff, and I mentioned I'm investigating how to build my classroom out into like the kindergarten age level. So this is
Yeah, yep.
there's a robot that I'm looking at that I haven't used yet, but I'm really excited about, that reads. It's a line follower, and it reads the colors of the lines. Um,
Oh, cool.
so the students would be able to color in the color, like a different sequence of colors would mean like go faster, go slower,
Oh,
turn left, turn right, that type of
that's a great
thing.
idea.
Yeah, so they
Yeah,
could.
because then it matches up with like what they are already doing, like in art class or something. They could
Yeah,
so like you're saying at like that age of kindergarten or whatever, right? That's like that's a
yeah,
real good.
so they can build their program on a sheet of paper with a magic
Yeah.
marker, and it looks like a
Uh huh.
like a racetrack, but the robot goes through the track in different sequences, or whatever.
Yeah.
And Yeah, but if yeah, anyways, I think, yeah, of course you can't get them right now because the chips aren't available to build
Well,
them
yeah,
for.
of course. Yeah. Have you ever
But
thought about developing hardware in this space? I mean, like what that I'm not sure how it's presented. One thing I've always seen is just like it's I think someone I knew, well, actually, a classmate of ours, Zach Verdeen, who's been on the
Yes,
show, he
yes,
talked about kind of selling into the educational market on the show here, and he was doing it for an SBIR grant. And like,
yes,
he just said it's just really long timelines and the cycles are really difficult.
yeah.
I don't know
His
if you've looked at that stuff.
yes, I remember listening to his interview, and it's his project sounded so cool. With I think he was making neurons or something like that, and
That's right. Yep.
that
Neurobytes was the thing. Yep.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I feel like the education space is really challenging because like I guess I guess you you'd have to make something that people felt like were relevant, and it would have to be really cheap because it's for
Yes. Yep.
kids and
Yep.
or for a classroom, and so you have to be able to purchase like 50 or
Yep.
100 of them like at a time. And
And you have to price in the cost of curriculum, I think, as well, because I
yeah,
think just hardware by itself is, like that's not nearly enough. I mean, this is something that
yep,
like the Adafruits and the, the Spark Funds of the world kind of have baked in, but it's not really even made. Someone like you as an educator, you're taking that and then putting curriculum further around that. The
yeah,
stuff I think about that like is sold to school systems has to be like, no, here's a lesson module. Here's like a plan to use all this stuff. And by the way, here's a bunch of spares because you're going to break stuff. And I
yeah.
don't know. It's just, it seems like a very difficult ecosystem.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And you're so right. It's all about the support and the lesson plan too. Like that's just as important as the hardware. I was thinking about designing boards for to make tiny line followers based on the AT Tiny processor, and I was going to use that as like a summer camp project for 2 weeks, um, and then I looked around and found that somebody already does that. It's the what's the brand? Is it Olamex? That's in
Olimex is one of them. Yep. Yep.
yeah, they sell these kits for like $4. That's like
Oh my God.
it's an entire robot with a microcontroller and two little tiny motors, and it lives on this little PCB, and it's great. They're really cool. Um,
Right. Probably not making a lot of margin per robot there though,
pro-
as a business. I mean, Olimex has many other things that they sell, but like, yeah, that might be a loss leader more than they make more on the cable than they do on the robot or something like that.
yeah, but I mean, God, everything nowadays is like so saturated with gadgets and educational stuff that I don't know. I wouldn't dare to like jump in there and be like, yeah, I'm going to come up with this novel idea that no
Right.
one else has thought of, and
Right. Right.
get rich off of it. I'm more likely to go in there and be like, okay, let's see what someone else has done and let's adapt it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That makes sense. I mean, I think that the whole idea of like getting rich off of it is, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen
no,
in the educational space. But maybe if you do enough things and if you build enough curriculum around it, then maybe you can, build a business there. Like that's like, but a business is different than being rich. I
right,
think.
right. But
Yeah,
yeah, God, there's so much good stuff out there right now.
that's great.
It's incredible. Like I owe a lot to companies like Adafruit and SparkFun and Code.org and Autodesk, and you know they make so many great products now for kids and early learning. It's amazing.
Charlie, where can people find out more about you and the programs you work on, and maybe follow you and
Yeah,
with your ham radio exploits?
yeah. So I'll go in reverse order. You can look me up on
Okay.
qrz.com. I've got a little page on there. If you're interested in ham stuff, I have um, my own personal website with some of my projects is at larrabeelabs.com. That's LARRABEE labs.com. And my school website is at ssesh.org. That's St. Stephen's Episcopal School Houston.org. So yeah, you can find some of my stuff on there.
Well, Charlie, thanks so much for joining me here today and inspiring me to to get into electronics deeper. Uh, I've always enjoyed watching your work and talking to you about electronics. It is. I hope to keep doing it for many more years.
Hey, Chris, it's been a pleasure. I could say I could say all the same things about you. So thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye bye.